My name is Rowan Hale. I'm 31 years old. The drill sergeant stopped mid-march like someone had slammed an invisible brake inside his chest. 1 second, his boots were pounding out that sharp, punishing rhythm across the packed dirt. The next, they were rooted in place. 50 cadets froze behind him in perfect formation. The families in the bleachers went quiet mid-cheer, mid-sip, mid-sentence. Even the wind seemed to catch in its throat. And then he looked at me. Not at my brother standing in formation, not at the officers on the stage. Me. The woman sitting 3 rows up from the bottom, legs crossed, hands folded neatly in her lap, dressed like someone who belonged in a grocery store line, not on a parade ground. He turned with the slow, mechanical precision of a loaded weapon changing target and began marching toward my row. Every step was measured, each heel strike a little louder than the last, like a countdown no one understood yet. Whispers rippled through the bleachers. Programs rustled. Phones lowered. Behind me, I could feel my father's confusion prickling like static. His posture tensed, shoulders pulling back, the way they always did when something happened that he hadn't planned, hadn't authorized. The sergeant stopped 2 feet from where I sat. He drew in a tight breath and snapped into a textbook salute. Crisp. Perfect. The kind they film for recruitment commercials and flag-draped propaganda videos. "Ma'am," he said, voice ringing through the suddenly silent stands, "I wasn't informed you'd be observing the graduation today." The stadium gasped as one living thing. My father's plastic cup slipped from his hand, soda splashing across his polished shoes. My mother's fingers dug into the edge of the metal bench like gravity had doubled. My brother's head turned out of formation, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. They all stared at me. The daughter they'd introduced for 7 years as the one who cracked under pressure, the one who couldn't handle discipline, the one they used as a cautionary punchline at barbecues and church potlucks. Now a drill sergeant was saluting me like I outranked the entire platform. I felt the moment split in two, the life my family thought I lived and the one I actually did. I kept my voice low, calm, steady. I'd spent years training that tone into my bones. "At ease, Sergeant," I said. "I'm off duty. Continue." His jaw flexed, but his posture didn't waver. "Yes, ma'am." He dropped the salute with that same sharp efficiency, turned on his heel, and marched back toward the formation. But whatever ceremony had been happening here was over, at least the version my family understood. The announcer tried to pick up where he'd left off, voice cracking slightly as he read from the script about honor and sacrifice and discipline. Flags still rippled, the band still played, cadets still pivoted and stepped and turned on command. But every few seconds I could feel eyes sliding back toward me. I could feel my last name quietly changing shape in people's mouths. My father didn't say a word, not at first. He just stared straight ahead, the muscles in his cheek twitching. My mother's lips moved soundlessly like she was praying or cursing or both. I stood up before they did. Not dramatically, not with a scene, just steady. I set my styrofoam cup down, brushed a fleck of dust from my sleeve, and walked down the bleacher steps as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Behind me, I heard the announcer's voice echo. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating." But the applause sounded thinner now, like everyone was clapping with one hand while clutching their confusion with the other. I didn't rush. People who need attention rush. People who perform for an audience rush. People like me, who've spent years working in rooms with no windows and hallways with no names, learn to move as if the ground only exists where we decide to step. By the time I reached the parking lot, the May sun was high and hot, baking the asphalt until the air shimmered above it. Rows of cars stretched out, grills glinting, flags fluttering from antennas. I had just reached my car when I heard it. "Rowan!" My father's footsteps came fast and uneven, the same rhythm they had when anger wrestled with fear inside him. I opened the driver's side door but didn't get in. I waited, one hand resting on the frame, the other still at my side. He marched up with that stiff-legged stride that meant the world had refused to obey him again. His face was flushed, jaw locked, eyes bright with something he'd never admit was panic. "What was that?" he demanded. "What did he call you? What was that about?" He said that like it was an insult, like the word itself tasted wrong. I didn't answer right away. Silence unsettles people who are used to owning the narrative. Finally, I said, "You heard him." He stepped closer. "Don't play games with me, Rowan. Why did that man salute you?" I held his gaze. "Because that's protocol." "Protocol for what?" His voice sharpened, drawing a few curious glances from nearby families loading into minivans. "You dropped out. You couldn't handle basic training. I told you," I cut in quietly. "I'm off duty." He blinked. Off duty from what? There it was. The question he had never thought to ask because he'd liked the old answer too much. You don't need to know that, I said. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The red on his face shifted from anger to something like betrayal. Not that I had lied, but that I had lived a life he hadn't authored. I raised you, he finally managed. I deserve answers. No, I said, my tone still calm, almost gentle. You don't. The words landed between us like a dropped tool, small, heavy, irreversible. For a heartbeat, we just stood there in the heat, father and daughter, two versions of the same story staring each other down. Then I stepped around him and slid into the driver's seat. Rowan, you do not walk away from this conversation, he snapped, trying to reclaim that authority he'd worn like armor my entire childhood. Watch me, I said. I shut the door, started the engine, and pulled out of the space. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the middle of the lane, hands slack at his sides, shoulders lowered in a way I had never seen before. He looked like a man who had just watched a stranger walk away wearing his daughter's face. I drove toward the highway, leaving the base and its flags and its polished metals shrinking behind me. The landscape opened up quickly into long, flat fields, stitched together by rusted fences leaning in the same tired direction. The sky was a wide, blinding blue. Cattle dotted the distance like punctuation marks, in a sentence nobody bothered to read anymore. I rolled the window down. Warm air rushed in, tasting like dust and childhood. For a moment, I let it wash over me, letting the ceremony, the salute, my father's white-knuckled fury spin in the back of my mind. This wasn't how the assignment was supposed to go. Come to the graduation. Observe the unit. Assess the instructors. Identify any training vulnerabilities that could threaten readiness. No interference, no contact, no visibility. Simple, clean, quiet. The visibility part clearly had just gone up in flames. A few miles down the road, I pulled into a gravel turnout overlooking a stretch of fields and nothing else. I put the car in park and turned off the engine. Silence settled around me. Not the kind I'd learned to weaponize on missions. A softer, heavier one. The kind that lets the past creep closer. Birds chattered on a nearby fence line. A semi rumbled along the highway in the distance. Somewhere, a dog barked, thin and far away. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. For a few seconds, I let myself be just another woman in just another car, catching her breath after a family event that went wrong. Then the inside of my coat vibrated. Not the jagged buzz of my regular phone, a faint, controlled pulse against my ribs. I reached into the lining and slipped out the secure device sewn there so neatly it could pass any casual pat-down. The tiny screen blinked once before resolving into a single line of text. Observation complete. Short, precise echo code. That was supposed to be the end of it. Mission done. Box checked. Another quiet report folded into digital archives no one outside a handful of people would ever see. Except missions that end cleanly don't usually explode your cover in front of your entire family and half a military base. I stared at the message for a moment, thumb hovering over the acknowledgement key, thinking about the look in Sergeant Frey's eyes when he recognized me. Not just recognition, calculation. Like he'd seen my name somewhere he wasn't supposed to speak aloud. Classified Joint Operation Memo. Buried Chain of Command log. Old directives stamped with clearances my family didn't even know existed. Whatever file held my name, it had just stepped right into their world. I tapped to confirm receipt. The screen went dark. My other phone, the ordinary one, the one that lived in my console with loose change and fast food receipts, started buzzing. Mom! I let it ring twice before answering. Hello. Her voice came through clipped and brisk, like she was already halfway through a to-do list. Come home Sunday. We're having a celebration dinner for your brother. Wear something normal. No, how are you? No, what was that on the field? No, why did a drill sergeant salute you like that? Just instructions. Okay, I said. She hung up without another word. The silence that followed felt heavier than the call. I sat there, phone still in my hand, staring at the ribbon of highway stretching back toward the town I'd left years ago. One life behind me, full of clearances and codename protocols. Another waiting ahead, full of people who thought I'd broken under pressure and never stood back up. This morning, I'd managed to keep those two worlds in separate compartments. Same country, same soil, different realities. Now they'd collided. No amount of silence could undo what happened on that field. I started the car and pulled back onto the road, heading toward home. The sun was beginning its slow drop toward the horizon. painting the fields in deeper gold, stretching my shadow long across the dash. Somewhere between the base and my parents' driveway, I knew I'd have to decide which story to let them keep, and how much of the truth I was willing to let into the light. What I didn't know yet was that someone else, somewhere inside the same web of systems I thought I understood, had already tugged on a thread tied directly to me. And that pull was going to change everything. The long road home stretched out in front of me like an old scar, familiar, faded, and holding more truth than anyone wanted to acknowledge. I didn't drive straight toward my parents' house. I couldn't, not with the weight of that salute still vibrating through my bones like an aftershock. So I took the detour locals avoided, a lonely stretch of two-lane asphalt, bordered by endless cattle fields, and sky big enough to swallow a person whole. I needed the emptiness, not to think. Thinking was dangerous for people in my line of work. I needed it to remember. Because people like to believe the past stays buried unless someone digs it up. They're wrong. The past has a pulse. It breathes. And mine had just woken up on that parade field. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled onto the roadside turnout again, the same place I'd stopped earlier. I turned off the engine and let the silence wrap around me. A faint breeze shifted the dry weeds. A few birds skimmed the fence line. Nothing moved fast out here. Nothing except the memories when they finally decided to surface. 7 years. 7 years since they thought I broke. 7 years since my name became synonymous with failure in my family. Funny how a single moment can define a person for everyone who never bothered to ask for the truth. I leaned my head back against the seat and let my mind slip into the past I'd spent years barricading behind duty, protocol, and classified directives. I was 19 when it happened. A night drill. A simple training exercise in the dark, bright tracers cutting through the trees, shouts echoing off metal walls. The kind of drill designed to push recruits to the edge, but nowhere near real danger. Except at 19, everything feels like life or death. I froze. My lungs locked. My knees buckled. The earth could have stopped spinning and I wouldn't have noticed. When dawn came, my commanding officer pulled me aside with no ceremony whatsoever and told me I was civilian material. The whole room laughed. It was the kind of humiliation that sticks, crawls under your skin, turns into a story other people tell for you. That was the version my family got. Cassidy, Rowan now, cracked under pressure. Rowan quit. Rowan didn't have what it took. But that was the surface story, the visible one. The real story began a week later. A woman with a badge that had no name on it called me into an empty administrative office. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't smile. She asked me 2 questions in a voice clipped so short it sounded like a blade. How long were you frozen? And what did you think about while you were stuck there? I didn't have a good answer, but whatever I said was enough to erase the laughter from that morning forever. The next day, I received paperwork thick enough to be mistaken for a legal textbook, non-disclosure agreements, medical waivers, psychological evaluations, and an invitation. Not to return to training, not to enlist. Something different, something without a name. The first thing they taught us was silence. The second thing they taught us was how to make silence useful. Echo Division. That was the nickname, not the real title. The real one never left the mouths of people who worked there. A civilian defense hybrid unit designed for situations where uniforms made things worse. We didn't wear patches. We didn't take photos. We didn't keep trophies. We didn't exist. And our work had weight, consequences that traveled farther than medals or public applause ever could. We were the people they sent when subtlety mattered more than firepower. We were the ones who knew how to vanish into crowds, into countries, into stories that never made the news. We learned languages the way some people learned recipes. We changed our hair so often it barely felt like ours. We slept in windowless rooms. We memorized threats that would never be spoken aloud. And eventually I became useful, not brave. Usefulness is quieter, more dangerous. The scar on my right shoulder blade, thin, pale, and almost elegant, came from the mission we later called the Night of Disappearing Coordinates, a midnight extraction that went wrong in 8 different ways before sunrise. The kind of night that teaches you the difference between noise and danger, the kind that leaves marks inside and out. By 26, I ran small teams. By 28, I designed the missions for them. By 30, I worked in cross-branch coordination, a place where lines between military and civilian blurred so thin they became invisible. No photos exist of me from those years. No public documents spell my name correctly. That was the point. But every life has a cost. Mine was simple. I became a ghost to my own family. They assumed I dropped out because I failed. I let them believe it. When Adam joined the military, I watched from afar the way he rose quickly, earning recognition I never wanted. My father bragged about him all over town. I didn't envy Adam. I just hoped someone would be proud of him without hurling my failure like a stepping stone. Last year, I retired from field operations. The years in the silent corners of the world had carved grooves in me, not physical ones, though the scar counted, but grooves in the mind. Echo doesn't retire you because you're weak. It retires you because the world has shifted and they need your brain more than your body. They moved me to strategy. 6 screens, quiet rooms, maps, intel threads, contingency plans. Then, last month, the assignment envelope landed on my desk. Thin, unmarked, alone. Inside, Fort Harrison, observation. I hadn't known until I arrived that it was my brother's unit. I thought today would be simple. Sit, watch, leave. No one would notice me. My parents would talk about Adam's graduation. I would sit on the edge of the bleachers, invisible. I was wrong. The sun dipped lower as I drove back toward town, the sky shifting from gold to something bruised. The closer I got to my parents' street, the more my chest tightened. Not in fear, but in preparation. There are 2 kinds of battles, the ones you train for and the ones that train you. Family falls into the second category. Their driveway looked exactly the same as it had when I was a child. Cracked, uneven, promising repairs my father never got around to. The house hadn't changed either. Faded paint, flickering porch light, rusted wind chimes clinking like they were tired of their own song. Inside, the voices carried through the door, laughter, clinking glasses, loud praise for Adam's accomplishment. I paused on the porch, my hand hovering over the handle, steadying my breathing, not because I was afraid, but because this place always required a different kind of armor. I stepped inside. My mother greeted me with a smile she saved for people she tolerated but didn't love. "You're here," she said. "I am." The dining room had been transformed into a shrine. Banner. "Congratulations, Adam." Printed programs. A slideshow looping Adam at boot camp, Adam saluting, Adam surrounded by applause. Not a single photo of me anywhere, not even from when we were children. I wasn't angry, just reminded. Adam spotted me first, eyes widening, relief flickering across his face. But before he could speak, my father intercepted with a glass of sweet tea and a proud grin. "What are you doing these days?" he asked, glancing at the slideshow instead of me. I opened my mouth, but he continued without waiting. Adam finished top of his class. Leadership material, real commitment, something you can't teach. My mother murmured, "We're so proud of him," like a hymn she'd memorized. Aunt Kendra smirked from the buffet table. "Didn't you used to work at Applebee's? Guess some things never change." A few chuckles. Adam stiffened, but said nothing. I smiled calmly. "I'm better at serving now." They didn't hear the threat under the softness. "Grab the forks," my father said. "We need extra." Someone added, "And water. Cass can get it." I did, quietly, efficiently. When I returned, every seat had a name card. Except mine. My mother blinked at me like she'd forgotten I existed. "There's a folding chair on the porch." So I went outside, sat on the metal chair, listened to their voices through the thin walls, their laughter rising and falling like I wasn't part of the architecture of this family at all. But there is a kind of silence that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being unwanted. I knew that silence intimately. Dusk settled into night. Fireflies blinked over the yard. The wind chimes rattled their tired song. Then, a familiar vibration pulsed through my coat. Not the buzz of my regular phone. The deeper, controlled thrum of the secure device. I took it out, screen glowing in the darkness. Proximity activation. Echo protocol. My pulse steadied instantly. Someone had triggered a signal that shouldn't be touched. Not by accident. Not without consequences. Something had followed me home, and it was only the beginning. The secure device didn't buzz like a normal phone. It pulsed. A low, deliberate thrum that settled straight into my spine. It was the kind of signal Echo designed for one purpose only: immediate, undivided attention. I stared at the screen, the porch light flickering above me, dust dancing in the beam like static. Proximity activation. Echo protocol. Not a request, not a warning, a directive. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. Something had gone wrong. Something close. Something tied to me. Inside the house, my father laughed. Big, booming, celebratory. The sound of a man convinced he finally had a story worth bragging about. The contrast was jarring. Family joy on one side of the door, Federal alert humming in my hand. I stood up from the folding chair, quietly as a shadow peeling off the porch rail. No one inside noticed. They rarely did, not even when I was a child. I walked slowly down the steps, gravel crunching under my boots in a rhythm far more familiar to me than the clink of forks and glasses behind the wall. By the time my car door closed, the alert had already expanded. Return to Fort Harrison, initiate passive assessment, contact not required. Straightforward. Echo rarely minced words. I pulled out of the driveway and onto the quiet suburban street. The houses were dim. Porch lights glowed like fireflies. A dog barked once. The world felt deceptively ordinary. Then my regular phone buzzed. The screen lit up with one name. Adam. I hesitated, a single heartbeat, then answered. Where are you? His voice was tight, controlled, but threaded with something raw underneath. Out front, I said. I'm coming. 10 minutes later, I saw headlights cut through the darkness as his truck pulled into the gas station lot where I'd parked. He stepped out, still in uniform, dust coating his boots. His hair was flattened from hours under his cap. His jaw clenched tightly as he approached my car. He didn't knock, didn't ask permission, just opened the passenger door and slid into the seat beside me. He shut the door gently, like any sudden motion might shatter the fragile shape of whatever he was holding inside. For a long moment, he didn't look at me. He just breathed. Slow, uneven, bracing breaths. Then finally, "What was that?" I didn't respond. Not yet. "You told us you dropped out," he whispered. "You let Dad tell everyone. You let me believe it." His voice cracked on the last word. I folded my hands in my lap. Would you have believed anything else? He finally looked up, really looked. His eyes were red around the edges, not from crying, but from the strain of confronting a truth heavy enough to bend bone. "I deserve the truth," he said. "You deserve to be safe," I answered. "That doesn't explain why a drill sergeant saluted you like you were reporting to the Pentagon." His voice rose, not angry, but wounded, betrayed. "Cass, Rowan, what is going on?" I inhaled slowly. "You saw what you saw." He shook his head. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I can give." Adam leaned back, staring out the windshield at the buzzing fluorescent light of the gas station. For a moment, he looked like the boy I grew up with, the one who followed rules without question, who wanted so badly to make our father proud. His next words came out so quietly I almost missed them. "I thought you quit," he whispered. "I know. I thought you couldn't handle it." "I know." "And all this time you were, what? CIA? Intel? Black Ops?" He swallowed, voice breaking. "What were you, Rowan?" I exhaled. The question pressed against a part of me I'd welded shut years ago. Revealing even a sliver of the truth felt like peeling away armor. "I served," I said finally. "Just not the way you did." "That's not enough. It's all I can give without putting you in danger." Silence settled between us, but not the heavy, accusatory kind. A searching silence. A recalibrating silence. He rubbed a hand over his face. "Why didn't you tell me? I'm your brother." "You think you would have believed me?" I said gently. "You grew up hearing their version of me. You grew up believing their definition of strength." His jaw tightened. He didn't argue. Couldn't. The truth sat between us, undeniable. "Adam," I continued softly, "if I had told you anything, even a fraction, it would have put you on a list you never want to be on. There are files you aren't cleared to see. Missions meant to be forgotten. Identities designed to disappear, and people who survive that kind of work survive because no one knows their names." He stared at me. "And you're one of them," he whispered. I didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't confirm, but I didn't deny it. His eyes flickered with something new. Awe, grief, anger, pride, all tangled. His voice broke when he said it. "All those years, Dad said you were a disappointment. He said you couldn't handle discipline, and you let him." "He needed a story," I said. "You could have told me," he insisted. I needed silence. He exhaled shakily, eyes glistening in the dim parking lot light. "Cass, I'm proud of you." The words struck deeper than any medal I'd ever been denied. I didn't have time to process them. My secure device buzzed again, this time sharper, more urgent. "Begin trace immediately, internal node. Ping potential breach." A breach. Tied to me. Impossible. Or deliberate. Adam saw the faint glow through my coat. What's that? He asked. Work, I said. I need to go. He nodded slowly, opening the passenger door. Before stepping out, he paused. Will I see you tomorrow? You will, I said. A small, hopeful smile. He closed the door gently and walked back to his truck. I watched his taillights disappear into the night. Only then did I grip the device and let the truth settle like ice under my ribs. Someone had reached into a part of my past that shouldn't be reachable. Someone had triggered a dormant signature that bore my name. Someone was either trying to frame me or warn me. I drove back toward Fort Harrison, the highway stretching like a dark vein beneath the cold stars. When I reached the base, the night was heavy. Floodlights hummed. The air smelled like dust and metal. Recruits had finally turned in. Inside the operations wing, a windowless concrete block pretending it didn't exist, a young officer escorted me down a sterile hallway. Major Evelyn Shaw was already seated in the briefing room. Steel posture, sharp eyes, a woman made of quiet edges. Commander Hale, she said, we traced the activation. She slid a datapad toward me across the table. Source, Fort Harrison. Barracks, civilian proxy signature. It matched one thing, one person, one ghost node that hadn't been touched in 5 years. Mine. Major Shaw watched me, expression unreadable. Is there anything you want to tell me, she said softly, before we proceed? I looked down at the datapad. My pulse didn't change. My breath didn't shift. No, I said, but I'll tell you everything after. Shaw nodded once. We began the trace. What we found would change everything. The datapad glowed cold and clinical beneath the fluorescent lights, lines of code streaming like a confession written in a language only a few people could read. Major Shaw watched me with that razor-edge stillness she was known for. She didn't accuse. She didn't soften. She just observed, waiting to see whether she was staring at a trusted operative or a traitor. I slid my finger along the data scroll, slowing when I reached the signature that had triggered the breach. My signature. One that hadn't been active since the night of disappearing coordinates. A node buried in a vault of sealed operations. Someone had accessed something they should never have found. Not a hostile actor, Shaw said quietly. No foreign trace. No external infiltration. My jaw clenched. So accidental, I asked. Accidental, she replied, but only by someone with physical access to something of yours. My mind raced through the list of people who might have touched one of my old devices. Only one came to mind. Kara, the girl who had grown up 2 blocks from my parents' house. Adam's bunkmate. The kid I used to babysit. The one who once followed me around like a shadow and called me her hero before she understood what heroism cost. Bring her in, I said. A few minutes later, Kara entered the briefing room. She stood at attention, spine rigid, eyes wide with fear. She desperately tried to hide. Her uniform was crisp. Her hands shook. Ma'am, she whispered. Sit, I said. She obeyed, knees almost buckling as she lowered into the chair. Major Shaw wasted no time. Cadet, she said, you accessed a secure device belonging to Commander Hale. Explain. Kara swallowed hard. I didn't mean to. I swear. I found something in the old bag she gave me last year, and I thought... You thought it was nothing, I finished. She nodded desperately. I didn't know. It looked like an old flash drive. I just plugged it in to see what it was. Then my screen went weird and you activated a dormant breach trap, Shaw said flatly. One hidden by a former contractor 5 years ago. Kara's face drained of color. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. She wasn't lying. She wasn't malicious. She was terrified. And she had no idea how close she'd come to being charged with breaching a federal node. I leaned forward, voice low but steady. Kara, why didn't you tell anyone when the screen glitched? Because, her voice cracked, because I was afraid they'd kick me out. And I've worked so hard. I didn't want to lose everything. I didn't know it was this. I glanced at Shaw, who remained expressionless. Echo didn't do sympathy. Echo did consequences. Commander Hale, she said, this cadet triggered a classified activation protocol. Protocol requires a formal inquiry. Possibly more. Kara's breathing quickened. She was seconds away from panic. Not yet, I said. Let me show you something. I tapped the datapad. A new window opened. Time-stamped logs from 5 years ago. Logs Vaughan, the contractor, had tried to bury beneath layers of false signatures. Kara leaned in, brow furrowing. What am I looking at? She asked. A digital trap, I said. Vaughn planted code to rewrite operational records if anyone ever accessed this node. You didn't breach anything. He did. Her eyes widened. So he was trying to frame you? Eventually, I said, but you stepped on the trigger before he could pull the rest of it. And now, Shaw added, we can finally expose what he did. Kara looked between us, fear slowly shifting into something else. Determination. For the next hour, we combed through logs together. Kara worked beside me, shoulders tense but hands steady, absorbing every instruction with laser focus. She was green, inexperienced, scared, but sharp, very sharp. By the time we cornered the hidden code trail and identified Vaughn's fake access attempt, Shaw straightened in her chair. We take this to tribunal at 1400 hours, she said. Kara swallowed. Do I have to testify? Yes, I said gently, because you didn't break anything. You uncovered something that needed to be brought into the light, Tim. For the first time, I saw pride flicker in her expression. The tribunal chamber felt more courtroom than military hall. Paneled wood walls, rows of chairs, filled with officers, the air thick with the weight of judgment. Vaughn stood behind a podium, wearing a suit and an expression of smug confidence that made my jaw tighten. He held up a stack of printed records. Commander Hale falsified operational logs during a classified mission. These inconsistencies have gone unaddressed for 5 years. He pointed to redacted lines that, taken out of context, could look damning. Then he smirked, as if he expected applause. I didn't move, didn't flinch. Shaw stepped forward, presenting additional evidence. Sergeant Frey entered the room, boots echoing across the chamber. Without a word, he placed an audio recorder on the table and pressed play. My voice filled the courtroom, unmistakable, steady even years ago. Hold fire. Possible civilian presence. Wait for recon confirmation. The room froze. My order had prevented a fatal mistake. The mistake Vaughn had hoped to blame on me. Before anyone could react, Kara stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. These logs, she said, pointing to the screen, were accessed from a device I believed was harmless. When I plugged it in, I triggered a script written by Vaughn, a script designed to alter Commander Hale's operational record. Vaughn's face collapsed into shock. Officers whispered. Frey's posture shifted, satisfaction in the set of his shoulders. And Shaw, calm as a blade, said, Tribunal finds no fault in Commander Hale's record. Clearance restored. Case closed. I exhaled. Not relief, exactly. Vindication was quieter than I remembered. Heavier. But when I turned, Kara was watching me with damp eyes and a shaky breath. I don't want the leadership pin they gave me, she whispered. Not if I didn't earn it. I pressed something into her hand, the small silver pin she'd left behind, then said quietly, You will earn it, and more. She threw her arms around me. I held her, the way I should have held her when she was younger, before I disappeared into the shadows. Later, when she opened her locker, she found a slip of paper I'd left behind. If you ever forget who you are, start here. The sun dipped behind the base as I walked across the airstrip toward the transport jet, waiting to take me back to D.C. The sky glowed gold, dust rising in small spirals as the engines hummed. Behind me, the base lights flickered on, the rhythms of a world I once lived in, now settling back into place. My family didn't know the truth of today's tribunal. They didn't know how close my past came to being rewritten. They didn't know how a salute, a breach, and a frightened cadet had pulled everything into the light. But Adam knew, and Kara knew, and Sergeant Frey knew. Sometimes the people who matter aren't the ones clapping loudest. I stepped onto the jet, the hatch closing behind me with a pressurized hiss. For the first time in years, I felt something like peace. Not because I'd been vindicated, not because the truth had been proven, because the people who truly saw me finally saw me clearly. And maybe someday soon, the rest of them would too.